for coming. It's lovely to see you all. So my name is Gwen Diagram. You can tweet me at Gwen Diagram because I'm imaginative like that. And I'm an engineering manager. I work at Monzo. So a little bit about me. In a week, I won't work at Monzo. So I realized that being an engineering manager wasn't for me. I went to a serverless talk today. And I was just like, I miss being an individual contributor so much. So I'm going back to playing with tech again, and I'm very excited. Apart from that, I'm one of the organisers of the Leeds Testing Atelier, which is up in Leeds. It's a little punk rock free conference. There's lots of talks about testing on loads of different things. So talks on how you test databases or anything like that. Like unit testing databases, and lots of stuff on DevOps and stuff. And I like pigeons a lot. They make me really happy. I like dinosaurs, I like traveling, and I like all of you as well. So thank you for coming. So a little bit about this talk. I'm going to be covering a little bit of philosophy history. Philosophy is massive. What I'm covering here is very small. I wish I could cover more because it makes me really happy, but I don't know that much about it, so I can't. But I'm going to be talking about how that fits in and works with software development as well, and how we can learn from it within our roles. So a little bit of warning here. I've tried really, really hard to learn how to pronounce these words. However, I really suck at pronouncing some of them. I was still pronouncing cynicism instead of cynicism. So I'm trying, but if there's anyone Greek here, I'm so sorry for what I'm going to do to your language. So, does anyone here identify as a cynic? Oh, brilliant. So you're kind of my favorite people in the world. You bring me so much joy. I was just saying this down the front because I like it how differently you see the world to me, and it's just beautiful. It's a really good thing. How about skeptics? Do we have any skeptics here? Cool. And any optimists? Excellent. I'm probably one of those too. So I've worked in so many teams by now, and each of those teams have a totally different culture. And each member of that team has a totally different attitude as well. Sometimes I'm lucky because there's a cynic or two. So, what exactly is a cynic? Cynicism, like a lot of philosophies, it originally started off in Greece. And they all started from this one awesome chap, Socrates. Socrates, well, he was executed. He was held to trial and found guilty for corrupting the minds of the youth of Athens, which is pretty cool. And impiety, which is not believing in the God of the state. So, who were these youth that he apparently corrupted? Well, I am so glad that you asked. Introducing Antisthenes. Antisthenes, he believed in virtue, that is, living a simple life and discounting pleasure, just like Paris. And one of his pupils was Diogenes. Diogenes was the guy who really brought cynicism to light, and I love him. Diogenes was said to live in a tub in the streets of Athens. The word cynic is derived from kines, which is Greek for dog, due to Antisthenes apparently teaching in the Cynicism gymnasium. Cynicism means white dog in Greek. But Diogenes took the reference to dog really quite seriously. He ate, slept, and made love in the streets, just like a dog. And he was a total troll as well. One of the things that Diogenes was really famous for was carrying a lamp through the street during the day, and when people questioned him, he said he was looking for an honest man. So this pissed people off a fair bit, and generally Diogenes was not very well liked, even though he was a bit of a dude. He had rejected any social values at all at the time, and considered all people sheep. He had a really strong disdain for people, for following social norms like not peeing in the street and stuff like that. So once in the market square, people got pretty annoyed at him. So they were taunting him for his dog-like behaviour because they thought he was gross. And so they were throwing bones at him and calling him a dog. And instead of Diogenes being offended by this, he lifted his leg up and urinated on every single one of them. So eventually Diogenes was captured by pirates. And they sold him as a slave. And so when they were like, in the slave market, dude, what's your job? He said that he governed men. This makes him seem like a bit of an utter jerk. But he had some really cool insights as well. He wanted to live as close to nature as possible, hence why he lived like a dog. So, what exactly does Diogenes, being a jerk and being kind of awesome, have to do with software development? The Greek cynic is with a capital C. The cynic that we talk about now is different. It's with a lowercase c. Some of the values are the same, such as rejecting all thoughts that aren't yours, but cynics don't usually pee on people. I've never seen Chris pee on people, and she put her hand up as a cynic, so that's my one person out of everyone. Yeah. So cynic is defined as Merriam-Webster is a fault-finding captious critic, especially one who believes that human conduct is motivated wholly by self-interest. The modern definition of a cynic, that is being a fault-finding captious critic, brings images to mind of the commonly known internet neckbeard, the outsider, human fault-finders, sneering on people, enjoying life. So, is that what we need in software development? There's a few different ways to look at this. As knowledge workers, we hold an incredible amount of power, and the world is now built on what each and every one of us works on. We're building the modern buildings, but instead of physical entities, our buildings are now online, and they cannot be built without us. We have the say in where the world ends up, simply by building the software that it runs on. So let's have a look at some interesting ethical slips in software. Who here owns a Volkswagen? Excellent. They are really nice cars. I love Volkswagens. The Golf Mark 1 is like the biggest babe of a car ever. So in 2015, the United States Environmental Protection Agency issued a notice to Volkswagen for a violation of the Clean Air Act. I'm sure you probably know this story because it is fucking terrifying to us what can happen. A developer, he coded the cars to report lower emissions when they knew it was being tested, to enable VW to receive green car status in the US. The developer that coded this is James Liang. He was sentenced to 40 months in prison. The judge said that he was too loyal to his company. What we can work on, it can have really high impact on our lives as well. We can change the world. So maybe some cynicism is required. So how about Facebook? I love this question because I'm always really surprised. Who here has actually deleted Facebook after the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal? Yeah, so there's not that many. I thought loads had. Like, it's really interesting, the bubble that you create, isn't it? So me and my partner deleted Facebook. I thought that meant that absolutely everyone deleted Facebook, and I am so wrong. It's just really interesting how the bias that you create. So, as we know, Facebook haven't been that responsible with data in the past. Could you imagine being Mark Zuckerberg? He looks really haunted now, and I don't think it's just looks. He is haunted. It's really terrifying what we create can become. The thing is people, knowledge workers just like us, coded Facebook. So we have the choice who to work for and to question their practices as well. So CNBC reported that Facebook is struggling to hire knowledge workers just like us now. Graduates are questioning the ethics, so the acceptance rate for full-time positions offered to graduates fell from like 85% were like, yes, hire me, Facebook, in 2007 to 2018, to between 35 and 55% as of December, which is a pretty big fall. But it's not only graduates, it's not only those woke kids, it's the rest of us as well. So standard software engineers, not graduates, fell from almost 90% in late 2016 to around 50% in 2019. People don't want to work on evil stuff. So looking at it from that angle, cynicism, well, it doesn't build software. And if we point our cynicism in the right way, we can change the direction of the world by refusing to build that kind of stuff. However, what about when cynicism gets in the way of building non-evil software? So how can we actually determine what is non-evil software? Again, let us refer to the Greeks. The Hippocratic Oath is an oath taken by physicians. Wow, I don't even know if that word's Greek, but I managed to do a right number on it. Is it Greek? Yeah, brilliant. Okay, that's why I can't say it. Okay, so the Hippocratic Oath is really long, and it looks like this, which you can't read, which doesn't matter because it's not in English, it's in Greek. So one of the dudes up there can probably read it, but no one else. But it boils down to this: do no harm, which is pretty complex as an idea because absolutely everything that we do has the ability to cause harm. But have a think about what you're working on and if you think it's ethical. In the past, I haven't. I think I almost built a social media platform for China that figured out what your credit score was through what you were a fan of. Like if you liked Jerry Springer, for example. I'm not sure why I thought of Jerry Springer. But anyway, sometimes you aren't told the full story. I didn't know the full story when I joined that company. We were originally meant to be building like a football game where you could choose what player wanted to do it, and then it merged into that. And by that time, I was already building things, and it was kind of fun because it was absolute chaos. And so I was just like, allow it, and I stopped questioning things. So at the moment, I'm working somewhere where the company matches my values, and that's Monzo. It's one of the challenges banks, you've probably heard of it, and we generally do a lot of things that we like. So, as you've probably seen, in the UK, we have a pretty big homeless population, partly because of the government that we've had for the past 10 years, and like a hell of a lot of other things. How many days? 2. Woohoo. So, homeless people can earn money by working with a company called The Big Issue. And The Big Issue, it sells these magazines. But the problem with that is no one carries cash around with them anymore. Like, I don't have cash on me. Whenever I have to get cash out, it's really annoying. And most people don't. Well, in our tech bubble anyway. Again, that's a bubble thing, isn't it? So Monzo ran a trial to set up bank accounts for the homeless, and so people can scan a QR code to buy a paper, and when you scan that QR code, the money goes in their account. And so then, after you've bought the magazine, you can pass the magazine on to your friend, and someone else can buy it, scanning the QR code as well, which is pretty awesome. That's something I want to build because it's helping homeless people, and like I don't need to use cash anymore, and I can like pass this magazine on to my friends, and I know that that person is still getting money. So to me, cynicism isn't needed here. However, some skepticism can definitely come in handy. So let's consider what we're actually building here. Does it indeed cause no harm. So let's think of some issues around the big issue work that could actually cause us some harm. Such as, do we actually have permission to work with this company? Could this expose our customers to fraud? Does the big issue as a partner actually match our values? So, skepticism is something that we should be using day to day. We should be questioning things. So, who here originally identified as a skeptic? Excellent. Let's look at the difference between a cynic and a skeptic. So, a skeptic questions things with an open mind. Isn't that picture disgusting? It makes me feel really ill, so I thought I'd show it to all of you as well. Whereas a cynic discounts with a closed mind. As Bill Nye, the science guy, says, Bill Nye, do you believe in ghosts? No. However, I would love to see one. Bring it on. But you may have seen in development people looking at legacy software and discounting the knowledge that went into it immediately in the belief that it can be built way better by the people that are there now, because they would never be so stupid to build it in the way that it was previously built. So who here's worked on a failed rewrite? Ah, nice, loads of you. I've worked on 3 now. They're really interesting, aren't they? My first one was actually my first tester role. That's me. You can't see my face, that's fine, but that's me when I was very wee. And it failed really, really quickly, which was good because I didn't have to work on it for long. Because you can never build exactly what was there before. Quickly enough to be useful anyway. One of my favourite rewrites that I ever got to work on was when I worked in Brisbane. So we were the 3rd team that worked on it by this point. And each time they decided that, this wasn't going to work anymore. So they fired each and every team before us. And then they started building again from the ground up with entirely new tech each time. I've got no idea if it's released yet. But figuring from what I saw there, how everyone was fired and the rewrite started over entirely again each time, I'm going to be a cynic and say probably not. The next company I worked at, the teams previously to us hadn't been fired. However, they had left. The original was a PHP monolith. And according to developers that don't write PHP, no one in their right mind writes PHP, right? Besides the fact that according to W3 Techs, PHP is used by 79% of all the websites whose server-side programming language we know, which is bizarre. So, if you want to rebuild something, you need to work with it, not discount it entirely. Who here knows of the Strangler Pattern? Oh, I love the Strangler Pattern. Oh, quite a few, so I'm going to be teaching you to suck eggs, but I'm going to talk about it with great joy anyway, because I love it. So Martin Fowler first coined the term in about 2003, I think, and he named it the Strangler Fig application. Funnily enough, from when he went to Queensland, Australia, which is where I'm from, and he saw the Strangler figs, which don't reproduce like normal figs at all. They reproduce by strangling. So a seed falls down and then it grows up around a healthy tree, and then it grows up and stops any light or nutrients getting to it, and it kills it. And then it's that tree, like the strangler fig, that ends up being around it. It's awesome and really sick. I like it a lot. So, but even though it's sick, it's actually a really amazing pattern to work with legacy software. It's one where you accept the old, but you also bring in the new as well. You use the other one as a base. So tidy the code and build with it. Keep what sparks joy. thank the old, and take care of the new. Look at the old code with skepticism, but look for solutions on how you can work with it as well, instead of purely discounting what was created before. How about building software with optimism? So, optimism is not Greek. Optimism came from a German man, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. Leibniz, thank you. He was a mathematician and a philosopher, and a religious man as well at the time, because it was 1648, I think. So when you look at A.C. Grayling's The History of Philosophy, the author, who is a really awesome British philosopher of our time, if you can go and see him speak, see it, because he's rad. Optimism isn't mentioned as a philosophy at all in this History of Philosophy book, although Leibniz is mentioned. And outside of just this book, it isn't considered a philosophy at all, which is interesting because apparently the opposite of cynicism is optimism. But it isn't considered to be a topic in professional philosophy. But his basic thoughts were, God is omnipotent. God is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent. God created the existing world. God could have created a different world, or not at all, i.e. there are other possible worlds. Because God is omnipotent and omniscient, he knew which possible world was the best, and he was able to create it. And because he is omnibenevolent, he chose to create that world. Therefore, the existing world, the one that God created, is the best of all worlds. That can definitely be argued. But we won't do that right here now. He was born at a really interesting time, in 1646, which seemed to stifle his genius, where some of his work was focused on proving God, where his work on physics and mathematics was really groundbreaking and still used. He's rad. So please don't discount him due to his ideas on optimism, because there's a lot to learn from him. So let's look at a project which embodied optimism. Who here's been to the Vasa Museum in Stockholm? Brilliant, quite a few. It's wonderful. It brings me so much joy. And it contains one of my favourite stories about project management. The Vasa was built between 1626 and 1628. So before he was born, which was also before we had a good understanding of mathematics, which I found really interesting. So shipbuilders at the time, they didn't base their design on proven mathematics. Instead, they based their design on feel. And the Vasa, well, it was a ship like no other. Originally, the King Gustav Adolf of Sweden requested 4 ships to be built. So he wanted 208-foot keel-length ships and 235-foot keel-length ships over a course of 4 years, which, I don't know, delivering 4 ships, 4 years seems pretty sensible. However, the requirements, they changed several times. As the Swedish, they lost 10 ships on the 10th of September 1625 because it was a 30 years war. So loads of people were losing ships, especially the Swedish. So the builders had to build 2 new ships to replace them really, really fast because the king wanted them, because he didn't want to lose this war. The king wanted to be fabulous. Instead of 208-foot keel ships, the order was changed to having 211-foot ships. And so what they did is they started the construction of 111-foot ship, and it had a single gun deck. However, the king heard on the king grapevine that the Danish were building this ship with 2 gun decks, which was insane at the time because not many or like no one had built one before. So the king, he was like, I want some of that. I want to be the most excellent. And so I want 2 gun decks as well. You would have thought that he could have one-upped them with 3 gun decks, but obviously he wasn't that inventive. No one in Sweden had previously built a ship with 2 gun decks. And as mentioned before, mathematics was nowhere near advanced in 1626 as it is now, kind of obviously. And the shipbuilders were artisans who worked by feel. They didn't draw out plans or anything. The original 108-foot ship was a really standard build. So when they changed it from 108 foot to 111, they didn't draw any of these features or anything out. So originally it was this 108-foot ship, and it had 1 gun deck. Then it changed to an 111-foot ship, and it still had 1 gun deck. So they started building this at this point. And they laid the keel out, everything was fine, you know, all going to plan. And then it was a 135-foot ship with 2 gun decks, so pretty vastly different from the original. Since it was scaled up from 111-foot to 135-foot, the ship was a lot narrower than it should have been. A new keel, it wasn't built because they'd already cut the oak. They'd had to like order the oak from the King's Woods, and it took quite a long time. I think it was like 6 months for them to get this oak and stuff like that. So they'd laid it, and they were like, well, we don't have time because they had all this pressure. And so they were like, it's fine, we'll just extend this keel. Since this was unplanned and the designs were not drawn out at all, instead they just felt around to see how it went. Due to the width of the keel, the ship became unstable because it had a really high center of gravity. Because although they didn't extend the keel widthways, they extended the top of the ship, and so it was like a big muffin. So, unfortunately, in 1627, the main designer of the ship died before the completion of the ship. So even though there wasn't documentation, it didn't matter because So the plans were undocumented. The specifications were not documented, and they changed fairly often, which was really difficult as well. And there were loads of, oh, that GIF doesn't work, but there were communication issues. Oh, there. Yeah. So 5 different teams worked on the hull, and they didn't communicate to each other at all. They were just building their little parts of their hull. On top of the changing of the ship size, the amount of guns that this ship was to carry changed so many times as well. The king was like, no, I want 26 ton or something. No, not ton, I can't remember. But 26 to like 34 weight guns anyway. Which meant that the upper deck had guns that were twice as heavy as they'd originally planned. Hang on. Like, there's no optimism here. There's just changing requirements and bad documentation. I mean, this is the kind of shit we deal with all the time, innit? Well, this is where the testing comes in. So, this is a really waterfall project, right? You gather the requirements, you design it, you build it, you test it, and then you ship it. And so, the ship had been built to the changing specifications. And now, they'd finally built it, so it was time to test it. Admiral Fleming, he was basically the product owner. So the king told Admiral Fleming what he wanted, and Admiral Fleming went and told the shipbuilders what he needed. He ordered tests. So these tests, they were carried out in front of Fleming and the ship's captain as well. So to me, I'm actually a tester, and so I love this. This is where it gets really interesting to me. The test was a lurch test. So that involved 30 men running side to side along the ship. And after they repeated this twice, it had to be cut short. because it was rocking so violently, they thought that this ship was going to keel over. So there wasn't any way that they could stabilize this ship either, because there was no room to add additional ballast because the keel was so thin, because they changed the requirements all the time and it couldn't, and you couldn't put more at the top of the muffin either, because that would be even more insane. So adding more weight would have put the second gun portals near or under the waterline. Does someone like Jedward? Or Eurovision?
I want to see them under the waterline.
So the Vasa, at the time it was carrying around 120 tons of ballast. To stabilize the ship, it would have needed twice that. The boatswain, when questioned by Admiral Fleming about the stability, he said, "God grant that the ship will stand upright on her keel." That's pretty optimistic to me. Fleming replied, "The shipbuilder has built ships before, and you should not be worried." Due to pressure by the king, the ship had to be launched. The boatswain and the admiral, they forced themselves into optimism because they were scared of the king, and they lied to him. They were like, this is going to be fine. And on the 10th of August, 1628, the Vasa set sail on its maiden voyage. After sailing for 20 minutes, a light breeze caused the Vasa to heel over. And 25 minutes after leaving port, the Vasa was on the bottom of Stockholm Harbour. So, there are a hell of a lot of problems here. But optimism from pressure and lying to yourself with optimism was definitely the final nail in the coffin for the Vasa. If you're interested in the Vasa, the best story about project management that we still haven't learnt shit from, please go and visit the Vasa Museum, because it will bring you so much joy. It's so good. They have loads of information about how they did the testing, and they've got loads of things that you can play with. It's brilliant if you're into that, which you all are because you're here. So yeah, check it out. So, back to the 21st century. We don't look at optimism the same way that Leibniz did. Modern optimism is looking at the world with, rose-tinted glasses, shall we say. Looking at the world on the basis that it's the best that can exist. Which, looking back to the problems with VW and Facebook, well, it's probably not that healthy an attitude. We need to look at software with a healthy dose of skepticism to protect not only ourselves, so we don't go to jail, but to protect the people using that software as well, so you aren't selling their souls to Cambridge Analytica. So, as knowledge workers, you have the power, each and every single one of you, to look at not only systems, but products from any angle that you choose. You can look at a system or a product with skepticism, where you can choose not to build that product as well. When you see a problem with a product and question the design and use of a product or a system from technical and ethical angles as well. Or you can choose to look at it from a positive angle as well. The world, it runs on our work. So choose what you want to build and question everything. Thank you. That was far too fast, wasn't it? Well, you have loads of time to go and get food now. Does anyone have any questions? Hi.
So, Gwen, which cynic or skeptic or optimist do you identify yourself as?
So, think we change a lot. So some of the times I've been the skeptic, just being like, this is never going to go live because we don't have monitoring. If we continue down this path, we're never going live. But sometimes I'm the optimist, so I'm just like, fuck it, ship it, a lot of the time. So yeah, it really depends. It depends on how bad the problems are that I see. But yeah, a lot of the time it's probably optimism. It's only skepticism when it's like the problems are massive and we can't fix these. Yeah. Hi?
Sounds like the ideas of, ethically assessing something and saying, I don't want to go with this. Have you got examples when you've sort of been in that situation before? And how's that worked out for you when you've, say, moved career or sort of changed job or changed roles and like that? That's obviously a fear people have when they're forced into situations like that where they feel obliged for financial reasons, for example.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. So, have you ever been in the situation where you had to question something ethically? And if so, where did you move after that? And how did you deal with it after that? Is that right? Yeah. So, not ethically, but as I mentioned to James, I've been in that situation technically where I had to say, this is never going live. And like, we need to stop this now. And I resigned because this is a tire fire. And like, I don't want to take your money anymore because it was a small company. The like dev lead was lying to the MD. He was like basically on the Vasa saying everything was fine. And I was just like, I am not fine with this. Like, this poor managing director, like, what are you doing to him? So I quit, said, this is never going live. I can't take your money or work on this, and just got another job. It's fine. But yeah, you do, like, yeah, you do need to go out on a limb and like, and it's scary. Like, and as well, it's upsetting because you don't want to be the person saying that. Yeah. Does that answer okay? Yeah? Hi.
It's just kind of related to that question. Like, there are loads of other jobs in our industry, and I guess what would you say to somebody who said, like, I have to trade my ethics for survival reasons? Like, I need this job, and I don't see other ethical jobs available to me.
Yeah. So I did this talk in Cork in Ireland, and a woman said that to me. But Cork is one of the tech hubs, so I didn't really understand. But some people feel like they don't have a way out. And in that case, just make sure that you're skilling up so you can see a way out eventually. Yeah, totally. Like, they don't have your soul forever. Like, you can train up, you can learn new stuff, and yeah. I mean, the world is your oyster. That's the thing. Yeah. Yeah, I guess. Hi.
Do you have any strategies for spreading skepticism if you're in a room of optimists?
So that was. Do you have any strategies for spreading skepticism in a room of optimists? Yeah. So it can be really hard when people are lying to themselves. And sometimes if people are lying to themselves and lying to above with things that aren't possible. So because I'm the tester, I will speak to people above and say, like, this isn't realistic. We're going to have problems here. So I also had a project manager who used to go and make up timelines to people. And then he'd be like, you're not delivering it within 2 weeks. Like, look what you're doing to me. And it'd be like, look what you're doing to yourself, Ed. You have done this to yourself. So, like, kind of show them reality as well, which hurts. And you look like an arsehole. And hey, maybe I am an arsehole, but like, at least I'm trying to reduce the amount of money and the amount of time wasted and trying to bring joy in the end so people are happier. Yeah. Hi. Have I seen the strangulation pattern work? That's a good question. You know what? I think I might just be obsessed with it and I've never seen it work.
We tried it once, but it didn't work.
I've heard stories of it working. Chris says she's seen it working. Yeah? Yeah, I'm like, so usually it's a bit different now because that's from 2003, but usually like you make microservices to break off little pieces of the application and then you kill that application. It's not so much building another monolith around it. It's basically splitting it into microservices. So it's going to merge into something else now. Yeah?
But the biggest failing vector for the Strangler Pattern is when somebody says, I want this new thing to do everything that the old thing does. If you start that migration project that way, it always fails. What you need to do is say, what does it do and what do we care about? Then it can work.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sure the people behind it hear that.
Anything else? Or shall we? You can come and hang out and talk to me anyway. Or like, yeah. Thank you so much for coming. It was really amazing to have you all here, and I hope you have the best time ever at NDC because it is the best time ever. Party on.